Hi everyone, welcome to another week's video. First of all, pardon me for the very challenging lighting condition. I'll do my best while editing, but it's a very grey, rainy day here in Dublin, so I am using some artificial lighting. There's not a lot coming from my window. I hope it will be okay for what I have to share with you today. Also, pardon me for my painterly hands, because I've been working on my urban art piece for the past week or so, so I have paint everywhere. No matter what I do, I cannot get rid of it, so I hope it will be okay. And today I'm gonna be sharing with you a few more books that I hope will inspire you to create, to draw, paint, and just make art. I have a slight obsession with art books, and I have lots of them, and I love always learning about new books, so I hope you will enjoy also seeing the books that I have to share with you today. Before that, as usual, thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate all of you watching my videos, using my links, commenting, liking. All of these really help me, and I am very grateful for it. So if you like this video, don't forget to give me that thumbs up. Okay, so let's start. The first one I have to share with you here is the most recent one I purchased. I got this in my trip to France. I was 4 days in Paris. I had a previous video that I'll link here with some of the goodies I got there, and one of the other things I got there was this watercolor book, and unfortunately I don't think it's available in any other language than French, but I mean, I don't let this stop me if I'm interested in books. I have books in Japanese, in German, even though I don't speak those languages, so you can easily follow it using Google Translate or just checking the images. And what I liked in particular about this book, by the way, that is by Jennifer Lefèvre from @JennyIllustrations on Instagram, is that it's dedicated to wood themes. So you have here breakdown of all of the content. So you have the material, the techniques, and then observing nature, and then some tutorials. So I'm gonna show you briefly what this looks like. So as usual, we have always a session about materials. She has here a spread, a very beautiful spread with her palette of colors, and what I like is that she gave all the names of the colors and the manufacturer, which is really helpful. If you see on the tutorials something that you are interested in, you can always check. And like I said, try using Google Translate to see the color names in English. That can help. And yeah, so she has a session here about techniques, color wheels, and water ratios, wet on wet, dry on dry. Here is about salt and about lifting or masking fluid. So starts with a stone or a rock, how to get this look. You have also here a branch. They are all imagery from the woods and this type of subjects. So you have here some greenery, then have lots of mushrooms. She has photos. She has also little references here about the books she likes to use for references, which is nice as well. I really like this session over here, where she shows how to reproduce the colors you can see in nature. So you have here little screenshots of the photos, and then her mixes to reproduce, and then she has indicated here which colors she mixes, which I think is very good for those that are not very familiar with mixing their own colors. There's a lot of different tutorials for plants and trees and mushrooms, like I said, ferns. There's also insects and other animals like snails. I got really interested mostly by a section here where they have in the end to paint trees. That's something I want to get better at. So she's talking here about landscapes, and then there's different type of trees which I really want to practice. So yes, overall I find it's a very rich book with a lot of interesting things to inspire you. So if that's your type of subject, if you're interested, this is Peindre les secrets de la forêt à l'aquarelle. I'm gonna leave a link below. I found this also on Amazon UK, even though it's in French, but I'll leave the links to all the books I'm mentioning here below if you're interested. Now, next one, I'm gonna have to zoom out a little bit because the books are a bit larger. So the next one is Vibrant Watercolors, and it's a book by Hazel Lale. This book, I believe I got it second-hand from a website called World of Books. I was checking some books where I saw this for a very good price and I could not resist. So in this book, I haven't dug in pretty much into the content, but I bought mostly because I found it interesting the way that she uses colors and contrast. So here you have the contents in that she talks a bit about color, and then bring the paints to life, painting for impact, and abstraction. So I'm gonna show you here what I'm talking about. She uses a lot of color and in this very expressive way with broad strokes and kind of a scribbly way, which I find interesting. It starts as usual with the materials, and then she talks a bit about sketching and observing using sketchbooks. Then she shares her process for making thumbnails and sketches before start painting, composition, and now we start with color. So I find all the images very I don't know, inspiring to me. I like the way she uses colors. And I like also here, for example, she has a painting and then she will show the color palette, and she will have the dominant colors. In this case, you have cobalt blue and cobalt turquoise light that you can see a little bit here and there. And then you have the supporting colors, which is in this case lemon yellow, rose, and red and brown. And this is something that I've been meaning to study and learn better, is how to dose colors in a way that is pleasing to the eye and how to distribute them in the painting. So I found this section very interesting. This is the same case where she shares the dominant colors and the supporting colors. She talks here about balanced palette, again about the proportions and colors. Then talking about color runs, you can see that in her paintings she really is not precious about letting things inside the lines or dry before applying new layers. Everything pretty much mixes on the paper, and I find this quite attractive, mostly because I am the total opposite when I'm painting. I am always trying to be very controlling with what I put on paper, so I aspire to try and use this more loose approach like in this book. So here you have a bit about line, shape, form. Then she digs a bit into drawing faces and sketching animals, perspective, balance, looking at your surroundings and using it for inspiration. Look how many colors. I always find myself, if I use all these colors, for me at the end it gets too chaotic, but somehow she makes it work very well. So that's something that I want to work a bit further on. Here, a beautiful paintings talking about evening light and creating impact. Lot of colors here as well. You see also that she uses a lot of effects in her art. You see the cauliflowers and all of that. It's really a very loose approach, which I find very enticing, even though I have difficulty letting myself try that. But yeah, it's a great book to explore a bit more the world of watercolors in a different way. Then I have another book that is kind of in the similar vibe. This is Taking Risks with Watercolor by Shirley Trevena, and this is a very well-known artist. Many of you may know her already. I confess I didn't know her before. It's quite recent discovery, and I really love her art. In this book she has divided in 5 stages. So she's talking first about the blank sheet of paper, getting started, developing a painting, is it finished, and moving on. And what I like the most about the book is her paintings. I find them very attractive. The way she uses color and texture and pattern, it's really quite something. And this one I bought purely out of feeling inspired by the images. I confess I haven't read the text yet, but I find the way she uses colors, and she has this, how can I say, this type of style that can be a bit, I don't know how to put it into words. To me it looks a bit cubist sometimes, or a bit like collage, but it's not collage. It's just the composition is organized in a way that to me looks almost as if she took different pieces of paintings and put them together. And yeah, I find them very charming. Look at this painting in particular, how much there is a lot of information. You have the pattern of the curtain here, you have the pattern of the fabric, more patterned fabric here, you have something that looks like an embroidery hoop maybe. It's really rich visually. There's a lot of information, and yes, a lot of texture as well, which I love. I love pattern and texture. Look at these also, lovely pattern. And again, she has this kind of loose approach, and I really love the colors that she uses. I don't know, maybe because she uses a lot of teals and blues that are my favorite colors. Even if you don't think you can try and tackle a painting in the same way as she does, you can always use as inspiration for a color palette. For example, this is a beautiful one. And yeah, she talks about, she gives some tips also here, like keep it simple and related colors, and all of the images. Look at these colors. And I think another thing that I really like in her paintings is that she uses a lot of contrasting colors. So you have here this green and red and orange and blue, so there's a lot of complementary palettes here, also here, and this, it's really attractive to me. So yeah, this is a joy to flick through. It's one of these books that when I look at the paintings, it instantly make me feel like just take some painting and start doing something on paper, no matter what, just putting colors next to each other. It's really inspiring. And yes, you have lots and lots of information here. So that's it. And now I have another watercolor book. This is by Harriet de Winton, and this is a seasonal guide to botanical watercolor painting. It's a lovely book full of tutorials divided by seasons. So you have early spring, late spring, summer, autumn and winter. I'm gonna flick through here to show you past the usual parts about materials. Here you have some diagrams, which I find also very useful. where she points out the parts of what she's painting, like the butterfly or the bird or the flower. And then we start. I painted some eggs in watercolor. This is very fun to do. And yes, you have here nests and landscapes, flowers. She even has the recipe. In this case, you have a wild garlic plant, and then she has the recipe for the pesto, which is very interesting. Then she has animals, more plants. Then you get into late spring with flowers. You have also the shapes and how to draw them. Many flowers. This is very beautiful, one of my favorite, the strawberry. More birds, trees. Then into summer we have insects, beautiful butterfly. And one thing also that I'd like to mention is that she shares all of the colors she's using for each of these tutorials, and she has also here an explanation of how to create the drawing as well, like this one for the feather. And then autumn, lots of mushrooms and ferns and wood animals, acorns. This is another one I really like, the blackthorn. And finally we get to winter, where you have more trees, some animals, some foliage. Really like this one, the mistletoe, very beautiful color. Foxes, that is actually what I'm painting now in my urban art, and I'll be sharing with you when I'm finished. And yes, it's a very lovely book with loads of tutorials and ideas. If you are not sure what to paint, you can always find something here. So the next book is also a book full of tutorials using watercolors. It's a very beautiful book called Painting Calm by Inga. Cannot pronounce this, I have no idea how to pronounce it correctly, but it's a very lovely book, also based on natural themes about plants and animals. So here you have some projects with foliage, flowers, light, structure and symmetry. She talks a little bit about connecting with nature, and something I really like about the style in this book is that she uses a lot of color runs, about mixing different colors on paper, wet on wet, and letting colors merge and blend and create new effects, which I find very charming. She has a bit about talking about style and vision. Getting started, the materials, brushes, talking about pressure, wet on wet. And something that I also found interesting in this book that I haven't seen in any other book so far is she's talking about wet on wet, and also to experiment using different time frames. So here you say, she says to try dropping pigment into wet paper right away, 1 minute since you wet the paper, 2 minutes and 5 minutes, and you can see how the difference is dramatic. So this I find it's very interesting for beginners to experiment not only with different water ratios but also with timing of when to add pigment to the wet paper. Then she talks a bit about glazing and lifting. Cauliflower, that appears in many of the artworks in this book. Exploring pigment interactions and using the white of the paper, mixing colors. Talking about color proportion, that's, like I said, subject that I'm very interested in, so I find it interesting here. For example, she's showing in a complementary palette of red and green how much you would use. You would use 60% red, 50% green and 10% yellow green, for example. creating color swatches. Here she has an example using the colors below, all the colors that she managed to achieve just by mixing, or doing this type of mixes where you start with one color and gradually add a second color, so you have this nice gradation. And yes, talking about being inspired by nature, color, and then you have a little bit bite-sized lessons, I would say, which I find that can be good if you want to get back to painting or just are feeling a bit blocked. It's not very intimidating, it's not a lot of text, and they are very simple shapes, but somehow very charming also in the way she uses all of these effects of the watercolor. So you have here some inspiration and flowers, leaves, sketchbooks, composition, also some lessons in composition and direction, rule of thirds, thumbnails. So there's a lot of things to learn from this book. And then she's talking about gesture as well, of how to use the brush in your favor, foliage and different seasons. Here is a bit more of that, like I said, mixing the colors on paper, using a bit of cauliflower as well. Here, the one that is in the book cover. More trees. So you can see a theme in the books I'm sharing today. You have 3 books showing you how to paint things from nature. Natural things, you can be a bit more loose with it, be more organic. Talking about symmetry. And that's it. Look at a beautiful page with some colors, look like a sky. So yeah, she has some tips here in the end, and it's a very lovely book. She has another book as well, similar to this, about painting animals, and I don't have this one, but this painting column, I find it very interesting. Now, I have 2 drawing books to share with you. The first one is called A to Z of Bird Portraits, Illustrated Guide to Painting Beautiful Birds in Acrylics. And then you would say, but why acrylics? I don't really use acrylics, but I found that this can be very easily transferred to watercolors. That's why I purchased it. There's a lot of good tips on how to draw birds. Birds are one of my very favorite things to draw and paint, so I was very excited to get this one. I have another bird book to share with you later on, but yes, if you see here, for example, he has all of the colors that will be used in the tutorials, and all of them you can find also in watercolors, even though here is using acrylic. The only difference is that here he uses white. With watercolor you just use water. So yes, you have a lot of different birds. It's talking about references and then sketching the birds and how to build your compositions, transfer the drawings to the paper. And then here start talking about techniques, combining techniques. And I really like this part of the book where they show about the different features of birds. So here is talking about wings, different feathers. Then you have here different eyes. Later we'll find different beaks and feet. I found all of these very, very interesting. And then you have all of the birds that you can learn how to paint using this book. So I'm gonna just flick through here. You see, you have all of the breakdown on the side about the colors that he uses, and then you have the instructions over here, and some of them he provides also the line work, the sketch, so you could also use that to practice the painting if you're not interested in drawing them yourself. You see many different types of birds here. Lovely robin, I also really like the style of illustration. I find that even though it's in acrylics, like I said, it can be easily transferred to watercolor. I could see this painted in watercolor as well, because I assume he's using acrylic in layers also here, diluted. You see, it's very transparent, so it can be easily used for watercolor artists as well. So I have many different birds to learn, be inspired by, and paint. If you, like me, enjoy watching and painting and drawing birds, that's a good reference book for you. Beautiful bird. So yeah, that was A to Z of Bird Portraits by Andrew Forkner. Another drawing book, this time about flowers. This is by Bianca Giarola, and this is by the Royal Botanic Gardens, the Kew collection. This is more about drawing, but it's also good for you to create compositions to then paint with watercolors if you're interested, or gouache. It can be, you have also here gouache. There's a lot of information about drawing different types of flowers. So you have here the parts of the flower, similar to the other book I shared with you about animals and butterflies and plants. Here you have the description of the parts of the flower with photos. Then she's show you how to identify the shapes of the flower first, like this, which is very useful to learn how to simplify to start your drawing. Instead of getting lost in details, start with simple shapes. So you have here the types of flowers: strap, bell, funnel, crown. Found this very, very interesting. I tend to always draw flowers in the same way, but I liked having this book because then it can give you ideas of different types of flowers to draw and paint. I have many different types, and here it starts the lessons on how to draw the flowers, the type of line work you would use, how to start from shapes and then stippling and hatching. You have the different types here. They show how to start with the shapes, like I mentioned in the beginning, starting with the center and then adding the petals. It's a bit more, I would say, for the intermediate artist, I would say, because it doesn't go really step by step from the very beginning to the end. But if you have already good idea about drawing and you have been drawing or practicing drawing flowers, this one can be good to improve your drawings, I believe. I wouldn't advise for a complete beginner, but for an intermediate artist, I think it's perfectly fine. You can learn a lot from the type of shapes and marks that they show over here, and you have, like I'm showing, you have many different types of not only flowers but also leaves. Then you have small scale, which is nice also for type of doodle art, or if you are into lettering, mixing with lettering also is nice. So yeah, here there's some ideas of how to use it, like I said, with lettering, frames, borders, a lot of different ideas on how to use this drawing tutorial. So that is for you if you're interested in flowers. We're gonna go to my iPad, where I'm gonna share you another few books that I have on ebook format. So the next book that I have is called Vibrant Watercolor Birds by Madhu S. And you start with some practice exercises about single color gradient, then you have also two color gradient, and then effects like wet on wet and wet on dry, which are always useful for painting all types of subjects in watercolor. And then you have the little tutorials for the birds. As you can see here, they start with simple shapes, like in other books that I shared before. You start with some geometrical shapes for the body and the head, and from there you develop the shape of the details of the bird. And you also have the detailing of the colors used for each type of bird, and the difficulty depending on the complexity of the design. So yeah, that's a really nice book with lots of different types of birds for you to try, and I thought was an interesting one as well, since I've been sharing books about birds. So the next book is called Creative Abstract Watercolor by Kate Rebecca Leach, and I was very interested in this book when I saw it actually on pre-order on Amazon. I was intrigued because usually we don't see much about abstract painting with watercolor. Here is Kate, the author, and in this book she'll start talking about the key elements like you see here: line, shape, form, color, value, and texture. And throughout the book she will be exploring these elements with exercises of abstract paintings using different types of approach and shapes. She'll teach you also some exercises of color mixing, of using your brush to create different shapes. You have also the breakdown in her own artwork about the techniques and the mark makings she did with the materials that she used. She used also a bit of mixed media. You have also some explanations on techniques like wet on wet, water blooms, and using salt, and using wet on dry, like you can see here. And like I said, making different patterns, drawings and marks with the brush. Another thing that I like also in the book is that she proposes often different types of color palette for the same exercise, so it gives you ideas to keep using the same type of instructions to create totally different artworks, which I think is very helpful as well. So here we have my list of more books to inspire you and get you painting and creating and drawing and having fun making art. I hope you like the suggestions that I have for you. If you have any suggestions to give me, please leave a comment below. I really like discovering new books. I always have my eye on the art book section, so I always have different stuff to show you here. And I really appreciate your support, so don't forget to give me that thumbs up if you like this video. See you soon. Bye.